is Thursday, December 16th, 2021. My name is Lori Kurtz. My pronouns are she, hers. Would you please introduce yourself? Tell us your pronouns if you care to, and all the things you do.
I am BeeBee Sanchez, and I use she, her pronouns, and I am a producer and performer in Portland. My production company is Querencia Dance Theater.
Great. What is burlesque?
Right off the bat. So I have been listening to a lot of my colleagues talk about this. It is an interesting, fascinating question. And I would say that to me, burlesque is the art of the reveal. That's my favorite concept of what burlesque is.
What are they revealing?
That is the beauty of this beautiful, fantastic, diverse umbrella. Is it can be anything. It can be actual body parts, which is what most people think of when they think of burlesque, but it can also be something, so many different layers to it. And so I love that aspect, the theatrical aspect of it, the storytelling aspect of it, and also just revealing something about yourself. And it also reveals a lot to the audience about themselves and their reactions to things. And so I just love this way that it can be flipped back and forth between the audience and the performer about what the reveal actually is. And I think sometimes you go into watching an act thinking you know what the reveal is going to be, only discover it was you all along.
How do you describe the kind of burlesque that you do?
So there conceptually is the idea of classic burlesque and neo burlesque. And I think that much like in, I studied art and art history in undergraduate, and we learn that language is never enough, right? It's always evolving and changing. And I think that right now we haven't come up with that new word yet. Neo burlesque is too broad. It covers too many genres, and it is no longer served its purpose to me, as far as really being able to describe the art I make and the art that so many of my other favorite artists make as far as burlesque goes. I think in a truly sort of academic tick the box, when I have to click a box on a form, neo burlesque is more correct for what I do, but I do feel that that just really scratches the surface of all the different aspects of what neo burlesque is, to me anyway.
Yeah. And just give us an example of what those aspects are.
Sure. I think with neo burlesque in general and the kind of burlesque that I do, it's very storytelling driven. And I come from a theatrical background and have been dancing and doing theater my whole life. And so to me, those are what I like to bring to the stage, that even if it's only a brief glimpse at a story, it's a bit of a character that you're revealing to the audience. It is important to me that that's where the art starts from, is wanting to be able to convey something about this particular character, even if it doesn't always, the audience may not know that, oh, I was being told a story, but you as an artist know what your base was to creating. And so when I'm creating a new act, it is often inspired by what is this that I'm trying to tell. And sometimes it's the songs. I mean, sometimes it really can be anchored in, I really want to capture this part of the lyric, but I also really love playing against a song and using a song in a different way than what it was expected to be, and finding another layer of meaning to the song that people may not have anticipated.
Yeah. So you touched a little bit on it, but why do you do burlesque? What does it give you artistically?
Yeah, it's sort of an interesting place to end it up. I have been performing on Portland stages since 2001 as a belly dancer. And that was sort of the foray into performing and being paid to do it. And what was interesting is that I've always been a dancer. I've danced so many different styles. I've been trained in so many different styles. But once you become a big girl, you start to have very limited options on where you can present your art and be taken seriously. And so, and we have more ways to do that now. I love today. That is the great thing about today, is that there are so many more opportunities, and you get Lizzo and Megan Thee Stallion, and you have all these wonderful, thick, lovely, beautiful humans creating and bringing space for other thick people to create their work. But back in 2001, we didn't have that. We didn't. We had Catherine Mannheim. We had big actresses who were kicking down doors, and we loved them, but they were not movers. And so belly dance was a safe place to create and make art and feel safe doing it, until it wasn't, is how I'm going to say how I transitioned out of that career. But even then, my sort of path to burlesque was forged, because about, gosh, it must have been easily 10 years ago now. Aurora, DJ Aurora in Portland, who Portlanders will know, she has created space for so many different performance artists in her time, and produced a show that was a celebration of fat movers and performers. And we had crossed paths a couple of times, and so she said, I would love for you to do this show, and I said absolutely. And it's where I met Marla Darling and the Witch Prince and all these other wonderful thick humans. And it was I didn't have to belly dance. She billed me as a dancer, and it was the first empowering moment where I was able to just make whatever art I wanted to make. And so I did a duet with another artist, and I did a solo. And that solo, honestly, if you look back at it and you look back at the photos, you'd be like, girlfriend's doing burlesque. I just didn't have that language for it yet. So that's kind of the first reveal of the path was starting to come to fruition even back then.
Yeah. You know, some other people I've interviewed have said a similar thing to what you just expressed, that children are given opportunities to do dance and theater and create and such. And then when we grow up, it's not so permitted. Does that resonate with you?
Oh, absolutely. It becomes, oh, bless her heart, she wants to keep dancing. That's, and we didn't, now that we become so much more of a global society, we're able to see performers. We're all able to see Alvin Ailey, even when Alvin Ailey isn't touring. If I had been able to see more Alvin Ailey when I was a kid, I would have known that there was more that was possible. But I didn't. And so we, the rest of us had to kind of keep carving our way through and keep fighting against what everyone expected of us to do. And so it was a real challenge. So I danced all the way through college, but it was always in sort of the club level, the dance club or the kooky, well, you're in academia, so there, there's a little more, some of the more eccentric professors that you may, and, I was blessed at a liberal arts college to have plenty of those. And so I was able to have a dance instructor who loved putting us all together, and I was able to bring in jazz and contemporary movement and hip hop and bring it all together into a piece. And, 1 minute we're getting to do that, and the next minute I'm dancing in, a black turtleneck and a parachute, because college. Anyone who's been in college dance, we've all done that piece.
Another aspect of this kind of topic is the amateur versus professional conversation.
Yeah.
And I think, it used to be that if you liked ballet or liked dance, then you had to go into a ballet company, and you had to go to New York, and you had to look a certain way, and you had to be a certain something. And burlesque offers something else. Can you talk about that?
100%. Yes, this is a hill I will die on. So Yes, in more formal dance training, that is absolutely, you are 100% correct, that you have to have certain credentials to be taken seriously. Otherwise, you are just sort of an enthusiast or a hobbyist, or you know, they want to pat you on your head and send you on your way. And I understand it to a degree. Obviously, I went to school with a lot of different theater professionals, some who went on to do big things. Okay. However, there's so it's classist at the minimum. And so it's a huge barrier that's sort of arbitrarily put up in order to say, well, this becomes art because you've done X, Y, and Z. And it just really completely defies all the actual art that's being produced in the world and being made by so many people, because they have a story to share. They have a song in their heart, as it were, a dance to be made. They have something to share with the world. And that is, you don't have to have special credentials to create art and be an artist. If you want to make art, you are an artist. And so I absolutely love that about burlesque, and really love being able to support other artists as they want to investigate what burlesque is, because you don't need to have all these special credentials. And I found that even in belly dance, there were starting to become more and more of these arbitrary barriers put up of, you had to have studied with this person or a certificate from that person in order to be taken seriously in belly dance. And why? I don't understand the question. And it does start to become really, really limiting, and you have to sort of take a step back of, well, who's putting up these barriers and why are they putting them up? And then how do I kick them down?
And so some people think of burlesque in the realm of sex work. Is it sex work? Is it sex education? What's your take on that?
Well, there is definitely a Venn diagram of sex work and burlesque, and I think that sex education is a really lovely way of putting it. I think there's an element of sex education, although I think even in that realm, I think the sex workers have really put their thought process into what being a sex educator actually is. I do know that there's quite a number of active burlesque performers who do the work of sex education and have, you know, clients and work in workshops and do wonderful ritual and all sorts of elements. And I think that there is definitely trying to extract the two. I think it would be foolhardy. I think there's definitely work to be done there. It's interesting to sort of figure out where I fit into what because again, to me, sex educator, again, you know, titles, it feels like something that should have some something behind it. Like, I've written a book, or I do workshops, or I've studied X, I've done this discipline, I'm gonna work on something. Even if that means it's a tantric discipline or a kink discipline, to me, those are still disciplines that you study and you become good at. You don't just, I mean, unless you're maybe Sting, you don't just like automatically become a tantric, you know, sex god. You have to actually work at it. You may have a natural affinity, don't get me wrong, but you know, those are things you have to study and become better and better and better at. And so is this sort of a giant umbrella, and burlesque sort of fits somewhere in that umbrella? I think there's an element that says it does, because in a lot of ways, again, with our reveals, we're bringing things to the stage and presenting things to the audience for them to think about and take in and digest. And that is a form of education. And our business is, you can say it's sex, it's sexual, it's erotic, whole different conversation. We can talk about erotica, because I can, but it is, but it is, that's part of this, that it is all partly related. And that is, I mean, there's that sort of like element too, right? We're talking about like the bricks of how did BeeBee get here? And, you know, one of the other pieces to the trail is when I started writing erotica. And so and when I was thinking about performing and coming up with a name, I was like, well, I already have a name. I'm a writer who writes erotica. So thinking about character and persona, it was like, well, that's an element of this character. A person who writes erotica would actually feel comfortable enough getting on stage and revealing something about themselves. And so, so I didn't have the classic sort of like pun name or, you know, something kind of fun or whimsical. But I appreciated, you know, being able to take this writer name and making her a full three-dimensional character and giving her life in this way. And so that was another sort of few more bricks in the path that led to me being on stage and feeling comfortable being on stage, sharing the sensual and sexual part of me as a human.
Yeah. And how did you come to be writing erotica?
Well, this is where we first start to talk about Miss Fisher.
Let's talk about Miss Fisher.
Miss Fisher's Murder Mysteries, which is a delightful show that aired for 3 seasons out of Australia. And if you haven't seen it, of course, I will insist that you watch it. And if you spend long enough with me, you will end up watching an episode. And it is, on the surface, it is you can just enjoy it for the costumes. You can enjoy it for being set in the 1920s. You can enjoy it for 2 absolutely handsome and lovely leads. You can enjoy it for all of those different reasons. How did BeeBee become obsessed with Miss Fisher, which is an accurate statement? It is finding a community of people that also really, there was something special about the show. My husband and I started it together on a whim. And in the context of watching the show, there was just something extra special in the delivery and in the age of the characters. And even though in theory she's supposed to be 29, wink, wink, nod, nod, the actress playing her is clearly not. And I also love that about her, because she's clearly a woman in her 30s who is scaling buildings in heels, wearing beautiful 1920s frocks. And there's a will they or won't they element of relationship with the handsome and dashing inspector, and yet it isn't the only driving force to the show. And I absolutely love that, because it's really an ensemble show. And one of the things that really I just kept like thinking about this show and stumbled into a community because wanting to know more information about it, and stumbled into all of these wonderful, wonderful humans who we connected on this really deep level. And it was because we were finding all these other things about the show. And it was a woman-driven show. It was a wealthy woman who's able to do what she wants, when she wants, and how she wants to do it. She's completely sexually free. Her romances are legendary and unapologetic, which was just a beautiful, beautiful thing to just sort of like digest and love about this. There's also her best friend is a lesbian, and that's like not at all hidden. It's not implied with a little like wink and no, she's a lesbian and she's her best friend, and they're amazing. And so seeing all these wonderful, like, okay, this show has everything, right? There's queer characters and there's older characters and there's and then you know, then there's all these beautiful costumes and settings, and I've always loved the period of the 1920s, but being able to see Australia in the 1920s was sort of a fun thing. But in the context of getting into this community, we kind of got dared into writing each other. There was a small group that was already writing when I joined the fandom, and I started reading their fics, and it was the first real fanfics I read, and was like, this is a fun thing to do, because I used to write all the time. I was a writer I wrote my first play in the 4th grade. Like, I was a writer, but I had let that part of myself go dormant for so many things, including college, which kind of saps it right out of you, to be honest with you. And so this was, people started having these little like writing challenges. Like, well, what if you took, one friend had a word of the day calendar and was like, I'm going to write a fic based on this word of a day, and I'm just going to write 500 words. And I was like, well, 500 words, like I could write 500 words on something. And so I did. And so I started writing these little snippets, and it was like, oh, writing. I remember writing. This is really fun. And then being able to write more and more, and then being able to write about a queer character and being able to queer up the other characters, which is the magic of fan fiction. And then it was like, oh, I want to do more and more and more. And so then it turned out I was actually pretty good about writing the sex scenes. And so I wrote a lot of them. And so then through that, I started seeing like other like writing challenges for publication. And so I started writing and submitting stories to be published. And it was all because of this humongously supportive community that absolutely, we're copy editors, we read each other's work. And this core group that I really, I cherish with all my heart. There was a group of 5 of us that really, really bonded over the writing and cheering each other on, and we're all our biggest fans. And we've got a few novels between us, and some short fiction, and a couple pending, and it's all been because of this charming little show that really at the core of it is competency porn.
That is great. That is great. So just sort of nuts and bolts here. Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born, technically I was born in Fresno, California. Hello. Did not grow up there though. I grew up in the Bay Area of California. And so East Bay, and what was the not so great suburb at the time, which is Pittsburgh, named after the big city. And then, and now of course, everything's flipped because, you know, time. And now there's like $1 million houses in that suburb, which is insane to me. That is not the neighborhood I grew up in. Hard stop.
What brought you to Oregon?
I came up for college. I went to an undergraduate university in Salem, and loved it, and loved everything about. I loved my trips to Portland, and it was just I really just, everything's so green and beautiful and lovely, and I also just sort of felt like I could have the lifestyle to which I wanted to become accustomed here that I wasn't going to be able to afford down in California. And so when the opportunity struck to stay, or well, to leave and come back, I should say, I left, came back, went to grad school down in Corvallis, and then that was it. It was like, I'm not leaving the state now. I don't want to, and hightailed it up to Portland as quickly as I could.
Yeah. And so you've already talked about dancing and theater and art history and all of that. Burlesque, in what year and how did you get started in burlesque?
Yeah, so like I said, the road to burlesque was sort of winding, but the real moment happened, JoJo Stiletto. So all roads lead back to JoJo. So Miss Fisher led me to meet JoJo because she produced a Miss Fisher burlesque show. And so she jumped into my messages and said, I'm producing this show. And I said, I absolutely need to see this show. And so I went to go see it, and it blew my socks off because it was, I had seen some nerdlesque. I've been in Portland a long time. I've seen some nerdlesque, but I hadn't seen this kind of level of geeklesque, nerdlesque, and was just totally enraptured with how they were taking these characters I knew and loved and turning them into burlesque acts. And they were funny, they were irreverent, they were sophisticated, they were all these wonderful, wonderful things. And so I started to think I was becoming more and more disenchanted with my current dance career, and was like, well, maybe there's something else out there. And then so that was like, well, maybe this is something that I would enjoy doing. And so I kept thinking about it. And then I decided to do sort of the year of study. And so I took a long year to really sort of take notes on what I was loving about certain artists and what I was seeing, what kind of depth of work and the variety of work, and really noting all the different changes and things that were possible on stage. And it started to become like, I think I could do this. And then the final impetus was my mom got really, really sick, and then terminal, and we knew we didn't have long with her. And it was a stark reminder that this beautiful, dynamic, fierce woman who had tried to instill all those qualities in me was going to be leaving this earth. And that was just a unfathomable concept to me. She was my rock, my champion, just so many things. And I was super glad that I was able to give one last performance for her with my group, and we did a whole thing, and she was honored, and she got to see, you know, us gift her that. And then she passed away much faster than we thought she was going to. And I was reeling and needed an outlet. I needed to move. I needed to do something. I needed to do something so I didn't go bonkers. And I needed to get back on a stage. I needed to find a way to outlet all of this energy and grief and everything else. And there was an opportunity to study with Eva D'Luscious. She was doing it was a 6 weeks, and it was in theory it was to create an act, and it was her Showgirl Temple series. And I was like, 6 weeks, I can do something for 6 weeks. And actually before that, Fannie Fuller had been doing a burlesque yoga class. And there was a yoga instructor in town. She's still here. Anna Chapman, who's this amazing yoga instructor in town, is a yoga instructor of size. And that was also really empowering. And so that was my first sort of channeling of physicality, was to be in this class, because it was yoga and then it was burlesque, which was this element of movement. And I just fell in love with Fannie as being this delightful human that I was, went and supported their work. They were part of my note taking, because they often perform really theatrical and beautiful, thought-provoking pieces with their partner, TL Ford, and they produced just art. And again, I knew TL from being a dancer, and so I loved seeing how they were taking their whole dance background and putting it out there, and how Fannie was taking her dance background and theater background and putting it all out there. And it was like, oh yeah, that's resonating a lot. And so with Eva's 6-week class, I was able to like, okay, I can do 6 weeks and then figure out if this is feeling like a thing. I loved her format because there were other performers of size that were going to be participating in it. So Vanity Thorne and Riri Sincere, who are two absolutely beautiful, luscious, full-figured babes. And I was like, I'll feel safe. I will feel safe in this environment. And so I did. And so I took 6 weeks, and we got to create, so we, had our name, and we, here's your act and persona, and create all the little elements of it and create a piece. And we debuted at the end of the 6 weeks. We had a show. And so we had a show, and suddenly I was a burlesque performer.
And what year was that year of study?
Year of study started in 2017, 2018. Yeah. That kind of overlap there.
Yeah. Great. And you mentioned your stage name is your writing name.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And how did you choose that?
That is, so back a million years ago when I was in kindergarten, one of my favorite, because I've had a variety of nicknames over the years, but way back in kindergarten, I was in Montessori school, so I was raised by wolves, and I highly recommend it. So if you can get your kid raised by wolves and go to Montessori, do it. And the gal that used to watch us, that was her nickname for me. My nickname was BeeBee, and it was Beautiful Bee. And when you're a kindergartner and you're not really sure about yourself, and you kind of feel like you look different than everyone else, when you have someone that calls you beautiful, here you go, you remember it, 40 plus years later.
Yeah.
And
So,
then the Sanchez part's actually a family name, and that's all I'm going to say about that. But
okay,
it's part of my lineage.
fabulous.
It makes my family giggle when they see it, because they're like, you seriously plucked that from the family tree and are putting it out there. Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
Great. Oh, and so you perform a lot.
It feels that way now. Isn't that funny? I wouldn't have said that at the beginning, but it does feel that way lately.
Yeah, yeah. And performing, and then you're also artistic director and producer, dance productions. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so Querencia has been, so my first version of a production company was called Nine Ladies Dancing. And that was more from the fact that I think 9 is one of the most perfect numbers for movement on stage. And so, and then I loved the play on words, right? I knew it was going to stick in people's brains, right? So marketability. And so Nine Ladies Dancing was my first foray when I was consciously uncoupling from my previous dance group. I created Nine Ladies Dancing as a space for a collective of humans to create together. And that lasted for a while. And then as I was doing more and more queer supportive work, I realized the name was too limiting and it was not serving me or my community. And so I did a deep dive and was searching through, again, language and words. And I really love finding those words that mean like a lot of things, but they're one word. The Japanese are so good at this. The Germans are really good at this, although it has like a million syllables. So I love finding those words. And so I really, really, really wanted to find one in Spanish, because there are a lot of wonderful Spanish words that often defy English translation, or they don't really work well as a hard translate. And Querencia is kind of one of those words. And so the gist of it is being able to find that place where you feel safe. So it's fine. So I wanted people to feel like they had a safe space to create on stage. And so that was like, once I kind of did a dive into that word, I was like, this is the word, this is what we're trying to do. Being on stage is often the safest place for a lot of us to feel like our full selves. And that's really at the core of what the word and what is going for, is being that you're finding that place to be yourself.
What year was that?
So that would have been, gosh, it's either late 2019 or 2020, right around the pandemic. It was right before.
Yeah.
Because I think I got to do at least one stage show under that name before things went to hell in a handbasket.
Right. Yeah. So just to describe some of the shows that you do, just to get a flavor of how different they are and so forth. You do Book Lovers Burlesque. Can you describe what that's about?
Yeah, that was, so I was connected with Lacey from a couple of different communities that we're both involved in. And of course, again, I'm partly Miss Fisher. And they knew I wrote. And so my first chance to be at Book Lovers was as a reader of my own work. And that was really exciting. Yeah, I was really, once I started seeing Book Lovers, I was like, why am I not, like, that was another reason, like, this is where I want to be, either as a reader or performer. Like, if I make it to Book Lovers, I have arrived as an artist. And so when I was invited to be a reader, I was super stoked, because that was going to be awesome. And I was going to read my own words. And that was also like terrifying, because I hadn't read them out loud to other humans. But it was really awesome and I loved it. And I met so many wonderful other writers and other performers. And then once I started moving as well, then Lacey was like, well, do you want to come back and be a performer? And then that was fun, because the reader was reading one of my fanfics. And then I got to perform a piece based on the fanfic. And I was like, well, I mean, if the world ends tomorrow, so I guess the pandemic is my fault because that was right before. Because I put it out there. I said, well, if this is it, I've done it. I've done it. I've done the thing.
The pinnacle.
Little did I know that it was a good place to hit, but there was going to be even more to come. You just never know.
And I noticed when I was doing research that you've performed in Astoria.
Yes.
What's it like doing burlesque in a small town on the Oregon coast?
Oh, it's a blast. So Astoria is fantastic because there are so many different communities that have coalesced in Astoria, and the Oregon coast is always a hoot anyway, because you just get all kinds of folks that end up on the coast, and it's often more conservative, and yet as you sort of move around and migrate, you end up with these pockets of super liberal folks, and then you get this wonderful clash of these two beautiful groups, which is just like being in a college town. Most college towns, not most, many college towns, once you leave campus, you are in the middle of a very conservative neighborhood. And so it reminds me of that every single time, because and Astoria is 100% like that, because Astoria also has an enormous queer community, and there's sort of this sort of winter bird of the gays that come and go through Astoria. And so the Astoria has become this very wonderful, artsy, quirky hub. So you have the dock workers and the queer glitterati, and everyone comes together and they go see a show at the local lounge. It's awesome. And they hoot and they holler, and they are so thrilled that you were there. And they are a giving audience, and they're delight. They're an absolute delight to perform for.
So would that be an overnighter out of town, or do you do a show and turn around and drive home? What are the logistics?
Yeah, I'm too old to just go up do a gig and come back. Like that, 10 years ago, I would have been like, yeah, and then you stop here, and this is where you get the best all-night burger. 10 years ago, me absolutely would have been the case. 40-something-year-old me, no. We get a hotel room. Yeah. And then I get to get ready in the hotel room, and I get to take my time, and I get to do all my little rituals, and then I get to do performance, and then I get to lead the performance, and I can go crash like a civilized person, and then get up in the morning and go head back to town.
Yeah. And then financially, payment, how does that work?
Yeah, so and that's one thing you start to I can be more finicky now that I've been doing this for a few years, and I always get paid. Don't do burlesque for free. But yeah, I try to work with producers that well, A, that I trust, but B, that are going to pay you a set amount, or for sure that they are the kind of producer that sells out houses, so that if they're giving you a % of the door, that there is still some level of guarantee to that. So there is, and those are the classic ways of getting paid, is either some sort of split of the door of ticket sales, or a guaranteed rate. And so I generally try to only perform with shows that are a guaranteed rate, unless I'm really excited about the show or festival in question.
Yeah. And then you were a producer and an MC in October of 2021, Midnight at the Crossroads. And so as a producer, those financial considerations, talk about that from the producing point of view.
Yeah, producing is a challenge. It's a big labor of love, because your priority is to make sure that the artists are getting paid and paid what they're worth, and that you're also trying to provide a safe space for them, and making sure that you have provided a place where they feel that they can create their work and bring their work safely, and that they can also bring in a wide version of audiences and all that. So to do Midnight at the Crossroads, I was actually able to write a grant. We've had a lot of our local regional funders have been wanting to get the arts and the venues back open. And so there's been a lot of cash coming in through all the different programs to try to make that happen, because you know, a lot of work had to come to a complete halt, and people have been doing their best to try to do outside work. But at some point, I mean, it's Oregon, it's still Oregon. And even in the freakish, weird weather we're having right now, because it's sunny right now and it's December and there's no snow and there's no rain and it's kind of mild, you could almost still get away with an outdoor show, but at some point it's just not comfortable for your audience. It's not safe for your performers. You want to move. So people got to come inside. So I was very fortunate to write and receive a grant to help cover Midnight at the Crossroads, because I really, really, really wanted to do a show with live music. And I really, really, really wanted to support as many BIPOC artists as possible. And I was super stoked because it ended up being that all the performers were identified as Black, and I had several disabled performers, and I had a mix of humans. And one of my favorite blues artists, local in town, agreed to do the show and brought her immensely talented group of musicians with her. And it was, I was willing to do it as a labor of love, but I was super ecstatic that this local foundation understood what I was going for and supported it, because then it gave me some freedom to not stress about everyone getting paid. I knew right off the bat, this grant will cover everyone's salaries. I'm going to be covering all of my tech team. My tech artists are getting paid, the lighting, the sound. The crew's all getting paid. Now I can just focus on some of the other elements of producing a show. So that's a huge gift to be given, because otherwise, you know, when you don't have those backers, when you don't have sponsors, it's you know, you're helping to foot the bill, and you hope for the best. And when you have an established brand, like there's several shows in town that have, you know, I mean, we talked about Lacey and Book Lovers. Book Lovers is a wonderfully established brand. When people see Book Lovers, I mean, Lacey almost doesn't even have to post the lineup and the show will sell out, because people know they're going to be getting fabulous stories, and they're going to be getting wonderful burlesque artists, and they're willing to come see whoever is going to be there for that theme because they love the theme of the show. And that's wonderful. That is a wonderful place to start from. You know, voyeurism in town. It's voyeurism. You know, you're going to be getting blockbuster acts. You know, you're going to be getting, it's going to be a variety of acts. It's not going to be just burlesque. It's not going to be just one thing. You're going to be getting a variety show. And that's very exciting. And you know, you're going to be getting some of the best in whatever, variety or theme that they may have, you know, depending on the month. And so you have some of that can help. It's not a guarantee, but it can help, because at least, you know, you've got kind of a built-in audience who's willing to go on a lot of different journeys with you and is willing to go with you. When you only produce 2 or 3 times a year, you have to rely on some other tricks to get bodies to come and see the work. And so so I really wanted to create with live, because not everyone gets a chance to create with live music, and it's such a treat when you do. It also meant that I had to find artists who I knew could dance to live music, because not every it's a skill set. You need to be able to improv. There needs to be some level of being able to have that back and forth language with a live band. And so they're not going to play it exactly as the song was written. They're just not. So you can't have your choreography so nailed down that you can't pivot. And so that was part of my decision making too, with picking which artists to choose and to work with, because I knew they had to be able to have that playful dialogue with the live band.
Yeah, that's great. And so tell me about your participation in What the Funk Festival in 2021.
That was easily a year in the making. When in fact, over a year, when Pucks did the first What the Funk, it was in August, and I had other commitments, and I couldn't get up there. I couldn't afford to get up there to go see it. and I was breaking in two because I loved it. Was like absolutely everything. It was the music I love, the concept, the theme, the reason behind it, like absolutely everything about it. I was like, yes, yes, and more yes. And so I was like, the minute that this happens again, I'm there. I don't care what has to happen. I'm going to be at this festival. I have to support this festival in whatever way I can. And so I spent that whole year, and they were like, it's not gonna be every year, it's gonna be every other year.
And can you describe what that is?
Yes.
What is it?
So What the Funk Festival is was envisioned by Mix Pucks Aplenty and is based on the foundation of funk music. And it's supporting BIPOC artists. And that is a tremendous achievement unto itself. It was an entire festival, multi-day festival, celebrating all of these different BIPOC artists creating their work, and then being able to play with funk music and celebrating this very Black art, artists that created the original funk music. And of course, it's grown since then, and there's a wide berth of artists who are part of the funk music scene, but the fact that it was sort of rooted in that. And I also just sort of love Puck's talking about it, in that part of it was rooted in the fact of wanting to do classic style burlesque, but to not classic burlesque music, sort of the frozen in time 40s, jazz and things that we often associate with burlesque, and wanting to be able to dance to the music that they wanted to dance to, that spoke to their soul. And I was like, yeah, absolutely yes to all of this. How can I, put me in, coach? And so I knew they were going to be every other year, so I knew that I have to think. So I was thinking about all the different funk artists I love. I was listening to so many different songs and trying to find what the inspiration would be, and then finally kind of came into this act and was like, okay, this could be it. And other people saw the act and were like, this has to be it. Of course you have to submit this act. And so I was super psyched to that people were responding to it, and was able to make the pitch, because I already told Pucks I was volunteering. Like, I was one of the first people to sign up to volunteer. And so I knew I was going to be on the crew. So I was on the crew to help produce the show and produce the festival. And again, whatever capacity you need, I'm there. And so I was already doing that. And then the act was chosen to participate. And I was just beyond the moon. And then of course the fear sets in, because then you see the lineup, and then you realize you're dancing on the same night as Gigi Holiday and Samson Boylesque. You're like, oh, Samsonite and Gigi Holiday, sure, okay. And then panic sets in, and you go and rehearse your act and change all of your costuming. Because, oh my stars and garters, that night was amazing.
It was. I was there. It was amazing. Oh, golly. All right. So before March 2020, before the COVID-19 pandemic hit Oregon and shut it down, so before all that,
yes,
what was the burlesque community like in Portland?
Oh gosh, well, there was a number of monthly and weekly gigs, and and there was Crush.
And what is that?
Crush was a bar, and it was one of the top queer spaces in Portland, and was really open for their stage to be used for a lot of the different burlesque producers in town. And so there was easily, in one weekend, you could have 3 or 4 burlesque shows or drag shows or combined shows at Crush. It was kind of a clubhouse. It was, you often saw the same people there. There were many of the same performers there, either in the crowd or on the stage. And it was a very supportive community. There was also the local lounge, another, may they rest in peace. And there was just a few other sort of smaller venues that were also open to burlesque, and there often is a combination between burlesque and drag, where you get the two in one show. And so there were a variety of different spots in town, but there was a lot of performances. And the pandemic really put a squelch to that. But I would also say that it wasn't just the pandemic, because we also had a bit of a reckoning in a lot of different ways in Portland, in the arts community. And that was just pointing out that we need safe spaces for people to create, and also a real stark reminder that a lot of our shows were really not diverse in whatever way you want to take that, but not diverse. There was a lot of as much as it was sort of this nice community, there were certain shows that would often have the same performers or with just slight variation, and we weren't seeing other folks being supported and uplifted in the same way. I think over the pandemic, a lot of things, there was a hard light was cast in a lot of different corners of our scene. And I think the great part about that is that emerges more opportunity and more faces and more voices and more humans being able to create the work they want to create, and having those environments to create them. And so while it was the first year was very challenging as all of those hard truths were coming to light, I think ultimately I have a very positive outlook on where we're heading, because of seeing so many of the artists really wanting to make the spaces that they want to create and a community that they want the Portland to be.
Yeah. And so in that pre-COVID life, what was a week in the life of BeeBee Sanchez like? All the skills you have, all the projects, just the juggling, the plate twirling, just sort of paint a picture of that.
Yeah, there's often, but pre-pandemic, I did a lot of kittening as well. And I highly recommend that. Anyone who's
what is that?
Kittening, or stage assisting, where again, the language, the names are changing. And it is the act of assisting on the stage between acts. And sometimes during an act, that depends on what the artist needs, but it's often the clearing up of the stripper droppings, as we like to refer to them, and pre-setting, so making sure that props are set and set correctly. And then, yes, definitely going out and gathering up items that are either on stage or maybe we're tossed into the crowd, and collecting those items to bring back to the artist after their act is completed. And so I had been doing quite a bit of that. I hadn't been hitting this again because I wasn't a well-known entity as a burlesque performer. The performers who knew me as a dancer and mover, I was getting cast in some of their shows, but as a fairly new burlesque performer, I wasn't necessarily in a lot of the other shows, but I was able to kitten for them, and was getting to know a lot of the producers that way, because they could see, that I was respectful of the work and able to, and there is a bit of art to kittening as well. If you add a little sass to it, a little something, a little shtick, something, it is its own form of the art as well, because you're part of the evening's experience. And so it isn't quite the same as in theater, where you might just be in all black and very, a hoodie, and like no one knows who you are, and you're trying to be very anonymous as you sweep up something from the stage or preset a prop. And in burlesque, it's more the opposite. You're part of the show. You're part of the action. The MC might reference you. You might do a little bit of song and dance with the MC. You might do a little something. And so you dress the part, you dress to the nines, and you are part of the action. So that was all. I did a lot of kittening. So there was a lot of, as far as like the week, do day job, decompress from day job, work on costuming, rehearse set. And rehearse is loose for me because I'm mostly an improv dancer. And so I have I map my music, and I I rehearse certain sequences and I play with the costume because you have to practice your reveals and what goes off when and which part of the music. But I don't have a set choreography where X always happens. If you watch any of my performances, they are never the same way twice because I am never the same way twice. But rehearsing some element of an act and then getting dolled up and heading to the venue and getting to work.
Yeah. So when COVID hit, a lot of artists, it had a negative impact on their creativity, mental health, all that good stuff. How did the COVID pandemic affect your creativity?
It went in kind of an interesting direction, and it was partly because I think it was such a newer flame, and I didn't want it to go out, and I was worried that it could. That I quickly started to pivot to video, and the opportunity to produce shows in video. Hence the reason that I have all the sparkles behind me. My very generous husband let me staple fabric all around the house up on the walls so that I could have a backdrop to do work from, because the first couple of things I did where I've tried to videotape were all terrible. And when you look back at the video, they are awful because we're working out of our homes and I didn't have the lights set up yet. I didn't have my ring lights. I didn't have all the equipment that I needed. And so we were sort of stumbling forward. And then the more we learned, it was like, okay, I saw a couple other people with backgrounds. I was like, oh God, that's so obvious, but it makes such a better look. And it's okay, I can do this. And so then like the theater brain kicks back in, right? And it's like, okay, all right, theater brain, here's what we need to do. You need to create a space, you need to create this, you need to be able to do that. And so, you start to remind yourself of all the different elements of creating performance. And so then that became kind of fun. I mean, I don't think anyone's going to say that they totally love it more, but it scratched an itch, and I was able to play with some things that I enjoyed. And I did come up with a couple of videos that I actually really enjoyed making and that turned out really well. But I just wanted to keep fueling that art. And also I did see the benefit of being able to keep sharing work. I think the video shows were essential to keeping people going during the pandemic, both on stage and as an audience perspective, just keeping us connected. And there are absolutely people that I got to know better because of the video shows and the after sort of the Zoom after parties and kind of chatting on Crowdcast and all the different things that we were using, and being able to stay connected with people, and then also becoming connected with people across the country. And in fact, across the world, really, because some of our shows were quite international. So I feel it was a really important piece to kind of keep going. And so I was happy to do it. And I produced one show during the pandemic. That was about as much as I could muster. But it was I was very proud of the work that we did, and I loved the show. So I was happy to have that.
Yeah. And so now in December 2021, and the last few months in the new normal of living with COVID, how do you produce shows to ensure, what are you doing to ensure safety for performers, backstage folks, audience? What are the new set of considerations?
Yeah, I'm lucky in that my day job is also at a theater, and I work at a theater. And so I have access to a space, and our protocols are pretty, we take our protocols very seriously because of the space that we have. And so I knew when I did my show back in October that we were going to be able to distance the audience, that we were going to be able to create a space where people could feel safe in the audience, that masks were going to be mandatory. We basically eliminated food and drink for that reason. And it's like, as much as audiences love to go out and do that, it was like, you know what, safety first. So everyone's staying masked, and we ended up requiring COVID. You had to have a COVID vaccine card or proof of a negative test before you could walk into the building. And we were very clear about that from the get-go. before, when you were buying your tickets in multiple locations, when you were buying your tickets. And then we actually had somebody checking vaccine cards at the door, and it's like we warned you. And luckily we didn't really have to turn anyone away, and I didn't really hear any like negative feedback about it. There was mostly positive feedback from artists and from audience members who were willing to come to the show because we had made so many rules in place. So and all the performers had to be vaccinated and show proof of vaccination. So that, and I see that more and more, and I just think that is going to be our normal for quite some time, until we can get a handle on this thing.
Yeah. And moving forward, there's even a new space open in Portland. Can you talk about that?
Yes. So a part of Portland reemerging from the rubble and hard conversations and tough things happening, a group of performers and artists connected with folks who know how to run restaurants, and a beautiful collaboration was made. And so we have the Queen's Head. And so it's been absolutely delightful to have the Queen's Head open for the last couple of months. And that is downtown Portland in what is affectionately known as Old Town. And the space is absolutely intended to be a queer friendly space. And I think that it's important to emphasize that, because we have some wonderful gay bars in town, and we have every lesbian bar we've ever had is closed at some point. I don't understand why. I mean, I kind of understand why, but it's just a shame. And so having these sort of queer spaces where people of all different sexualities and identities can feel like they can come and that it's their space is wonderful. And that is exactly what the Queen's Head is trying to do, both in the kind of work that they're producing and just the environment that they're creating. The atmosphere is trying to be very welcoming to all different identities and ways of being and humans. And I think that's wonderful. And so Lola Coquette is the executive producer and is able to bring in, so she's producing some of her own work, and some of the co-producers that she likes to work with, like Catastrophic as signature with Kit and Lola, also with Toxic doing a brunch and doing some drag. And but then also really being open to the drag community as well. So Claire apparently has been producing work, and so they're leaving the space open. And Lola's very, very thoughtful about what other producers that they're bringing in to help produce work in the days and the weekends when she's not doing a show. And so slowly but sure, and it's a lot of those drag shows and have been all ages. Another really important aspect of queer community is being able to bring in all of these different age groups and being multi-generational, so that people feel like they have those spaces early on and can see themselves on stage. And that's often a challenge when you have bar spaces, but luckily they're a restaurant and a bar, and so they're able to have these all ages opportunities on the weekends before they transfer over to the after hours.
Yeah, that's great. Just some other, just sort of pivoting a little bit, you've already talked about, social reckoning and moving forward in the society, bringing important topics to the forefront and all of that. Around the topic of cultural appropriation, is there a conversation still being had in Portland, or is that sort of old news and we've moved past it and we all know?
Ooh, well, I suppose it depends on who you ask, I would say is the answer to that question. Because this cultural appropriation is not a topic that you get to talk about one summer and feel like you check the box off and say that you did the thing. There are so many different ways to examine cultural appropriation, and we've all been, as performers, we've all at some point fallen victim to it, either accidentally appropriating or appropriating in ways that you didn't think that you were. and gaining that knowledge, right? Being, you know, part of the appropriation is learning and understanding that what dominant culture has decided was okay isn't always okay, and having listening to other voices and listening to people from the community that you may have been representing and hearing their thoughts and feelings about things is and listening to that is widely important. And the other thing is that all communities are not homogenous. And so what is deeply concerning to some members of a community maybe isn't as concerning to other members of the community. And that's not to say that, well, my friend said it was okay, therefore it's okay. It's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that you have to be mindful that because you may have had a conversation with some member of a community and they thought that maybe your act was charming, funny, or okay, turns out maybe they're not the best spokesperson for the rest of that community. And so you know, and that's just to say that we have to keep listening to all of the voices in our community, and you're never going to please everyone. I mean, we're never going to please anyone. And there has to be that room for satire and an opportunity to shed light on some things, and all of that is true. However, being able to borrow, even if you think it's thoughtfully from a community, you have to really ask yourself why you're doing it and what you're trying to gain from it, and then what you're doing to support the community that you think that you're supporting. But I also think that you know, being the appropriation police is also not helpful, especially if you are not actually of the community in question. There's being an ally, and then there's being something else. And that honestly is the bigger problem, not the bigger problem, that is one of the big problems in Portland, is the well-meaning person who maybe doesn't know what they're talking about. And so there are well-meaning folks who want to protect or shield a community, but maybe don't have all the right information and don't have a real business speaking on behalf of a community. And so I think that those are all parts of it. It's a sophisticated conversation. It's not something that you can have in one day. It's not something that you get to solve with one meme, one well-worded quote, one thoughtful post, and maybe one announcement, you know, one land acknowledgement at one show once a year. You know, there's just, you have to keep having these conversations and checking in and checking the community and seeing what you're doing.
Yeah. So Oregon has a fairly white Caucasian demographic.
Mm-hmm.
How do you achieve diversity in the shows in Portland? Do you do outreach to underrepresented communities? How do you navigate that?
Yeah, one of my favorite lines from a urban planning specialist that I had a chance to be at a talk back, and they were presenting, and he talked about the fact that really Portland is like a cream-filled donut, and that the farther out you go, the browner Portland gets. And so unlike many urban centers where you expect more diversity in the urban center and the suburbs to be, you know, white because of white flight. I mean, do your history, folks. But in Portland, we have sort of an interesting reverse situation where you have a lot of communities that settled out in the suburbs, and you can thank, you know, our big industries like Nike and Intel and you know, and some of our tech companies who went out to the suburbs. And so a lot of folks went with them. And so you have growth and also gentrification. Let's not also, we have to honor that moment in our history as well. But people did leave these inner cores and move out for more opportunity and different, you know, different neighborhoods, all the different amenities, etc. And so what's interesting is that you have to keep doing the outreach. Any producer in town, you have to keep doing the outreach, because the other problem that happens is that then there's like the same 6 performers keep getting hired. And again, you haven't really solved the problem. You've just been giving those 6 performers a great paycheck, but you're not solving the problem of bringing in new voices and different voices into the community. And so as a producer, and I think the Portland producers have been doing a pretty good job of this, of staying in contact with each other and talking and letting each other know, hey, this artist is coming through town who wants to, who has a show for them. Come and having producers come to different showcases as different folks kind of, graduate from the 101s, the 201s, and start doing showcases. It's paramount to the producers to really make the rounds and try to get to some of these shows to see who these new performers are, because some of them are like me, where they're new to burlesque, but not necessarily new to performing, and have some wonderful skills and acts that they're bringing just right out of the gate. Some of these folks are swinging right out of the gate. Or that, and constantly just chatting with each other about who should I be hiring in? I want to do a show about X, who do you know? You have to keep networking and keep talking to each other and keep supporting the community. Otherwise, it does start to become homogenous in one way or another, even if it's the same, the same 4 fat performers, the same 4 Black performers, the same 4 Latinx performers. If we don't keep rotating people through, then we haven't done much in the way of actually supporting diversity or community. So we have to keep rotating people in and cultivating.
And what about the audiences? Bringing in new audiences, audience development?
That is the $1 million question, to be honest with you, because we joke internally that we're just passing money around from each other, because we also, I try to go to everyone's shows, they're trying to come to my shows, we're all trying to support each other, but we can't just keep performing for each other. We have to keep diversifying the audiences. And so audience development, I think, is a really interesting, different challenge. And part of it is going back to that original question, which is, what is burlesque? And so because I even have very close friends who have yet to come see me perform burlesque because they don't get it. They don't think they like burlesque, or they think they have an issue with burlesque. And they haven't really asked me why. Like, we haven't had that conversation yet. And I'm working my way into having that conversation with them. But there are some folks who just haven't gone to support, or have a barrier to trying to support. And it's interesting to sort of overcome what that issue is and what they think they might be coming to see. And then you sort of, try to tease them out and try to get them to, I enjoyed that actually with the videos during the pandemic, is that I was able to encourage some of my other friends to watch burlesque and say, like, hey, I'm going to watch the show. Let's make a date of it. And we'll all get on and watch this video together. And then we can chat about it afterwards, and it'll feel like we've gone out. And so I had a few friends that were like that were like, oh my gosh. And, and some of my Miss Fisher friends, like they got drawn. It was like, oh, you'll know this performer from X, so watch this virtual show. You're going to love it. And so it was great. They started and they watched my shows, and they were watching some of these other shows, and they were, they're very knowledgeable now about burlesque and what they like and what they don't like. And so, but it is that. I mean, I think that was one of the real gifts of the video shows, was that it was a very non-threatening way for people to be introduced to burlesque, because they didn't have to physically go somewhere and be uncomfortable. They could sit in their own home in their pajamas and be uncomfortable, and no one had to know it but them. So, and they could figure out, or they could get over it and be like, oh, I thought I was going to be uncomfortable, but actually I'm really enjoying this, or I would absolutely go see this again, or how do I see this performer again, because oh my gosh, I need more of this human in my life, which is really, I think, what most people need when they come, when they're coming to something like burlesque. I think it's a lot easier when you bring someone in. It's when you show them a clip of Isaiah, and then you say, that's who is in my show. So you want to see more of that? then you got to come to my show. And they're like, I'm in, because I need to see that human do all the things. And so there's a little bit of that, but there's a lot of breaking down of barriers and stereotypes that has to happen in order to keep diversifying the audience. Because there's a lot of folks that have real stereotypes about what they think they're going to come see when they see a burlesque show.
So people in burlesque say it empowers them.
Mm-hmm.
What's your take on that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the great thing about burlesque is that I get to bring all these different elements of my art into what I do. And so I'm not pigeonholed into one thing. I can be all kinds of different things, and that is empowering. Like I said, when DJ Aurora hired me to be a dancer, I didn't have to be a specific kind of dancer. I was a dancer and they wanted to hire me. And burlesque is that same kind of open umbrella where you get to bring in all these different elements. And if you want to, and like I said, it's the art of the reveal, right? And so you get to reveal different elements of yourself. And one of the most beautiful pieces I ever saw, actually it was TL and it was Fanny. And by the end of it, you could have counted on one hand the items of clothing that was removed, because it wasn't that kind of act. It wasn't about that. And yet everyone was exposed by the end of this act, because it was such a deep reveal of the human condition and relationships and falling in love, that you were a mess by the end of this act. And that is just such a gift to be able to give to people on a stage. And so being able to have a space that's safe to do that, incredibly empowering, that you get to bring that level of yourself to the work and share that part of your art and your heart and your thoughtfulness, and being able to bring all that and also have it be funny or satirical or political. All of those are also super important parts of the burlesque family. And being able to, I mean, anytime I'm on a stage is political. I mean, you can't put a fat body on a stage, especially a fat BIPOC body on a stage, and have it not immediately be political, especially in 2021. And so, but then where do we take it from there? So like me already being on a stage is already like, I've already pissed off half the country. You're welcome. Now, how do we know, where do we take it from there? And so being able to have a space and a venue and a place to share your voice, it's an amazing gift to have as a performer.
And so you just talked about also how burlesque can be a force for social change right there. Yeah. Yeah. What are the challenges facing burlesque today?
I think it is audience. I think continuing to just enhance the audience. And also that's also taking, you have the really high level folks, especially as the world starts to reopen again and you get the big touring companies going again, is that that starts to become a more limited version of what you think burlesque is going to be, where it has to be, $10,000 worth of Swarovski crystals and, huge moving props and so on the one hand, it's going to be great to get those shows back on the road because it gets people money, and it is part of that audience development, because someone sees the $10,000 Swarovski outfit and they fall in love with it, and now they want to come see what my local people do this too. What? That's been happening right here in my hometown and I didn't even know it. So those are hugely helpful for that reason. But it's also, so it's the audience diversification that's going to continue to be a challenge, but also it's the diversity. And so not taking the moment and saying, okay, we've done the work for the last 2 years and we're thinking about it. And so now that we've thought about it and we wrote a diversity statement, we've done it, it's actually doing the work. And so as we see the new posters emerge, as we see shows becoming announced again, you can tell who's done the homework and which producers have been paying attention and which producers still need to take a seat and listen, because that's going to be the real proof in the pudding, is who do we have on our stages. And that's not just BIPOC and it's not just fat bodies. It's also providing space and accessibility to those who need it. And coming out of a pandemic, we have a lot more folks who actually need accommodations that maybe didn't need them before, and really being mindful of that, because a lot of our spaces, especially since burlesque often exists in bar spaces, they're not accessible. They're not accessible in one way or another. And so, and also understanding that accessibility is not one size fits all. There is no checklist where like, yep, boop, I checked the box, that therefore all humans who need accommodations are accommodated. You may have a ramped entrance, that's fantastic. Do you have seating that is accommodating to different bodies? Do you have seating that can be modular for mobility devices? What is your backstage area like? Is everyone getting dressed in a broom closet? Guess what? Broom closet's not going to work for everybody who needs an accommodation. What's the scent policy? What's the sound policy? Are there going to be different visual strobes? Is that, are you warning your audience appropriately? You know, there's just all these different things that we have to keep thinking about, and that's going to make our audiences and our performers more diverse. Is if we keep making safer spaces that are actually thoughtful spaces, and be mindful that once you can't solve one problem and think you've solved all problems. You have to keep being nimble and thoughtful, talking to your performers, talking to your potential performers, and if people aren't working with you, find out why. Because it's probably not them that's the problem.
So, final question. What do you wish the general public would understand about burlesque?
That it is so much more than just tits and ass. That it is, in fact, the art of the reveal, that there is an element of theatricality and humor and humanity and so many other, when burlesque is on fire, it's like good theater, and you're going to be hitting on all cylinders, and it's going to give you the feels in one way or the other. It's going to make things memorable, and it's going to remind you of your humanity and the humanity of those around you. And that's what I think people don't often realize they're going to get when they come see a burlesque show.
BeeBee, thank you so very much.
Thank you. It was fun.